Amendment 3 has created a lot of buzz here in the state of Florida, and it's crucial that voters understand the real impact of what it'll do here in our state. Now, here at My Florida Green, we believe in having a healthy discourse when it comes to controversial topics, especially ones like Amendment 3. So in an effort to create a fair and balanced conversation about Amendment 3, on October 23rd, we invited the Policy Director of Smart and Safe, Jake Hoffman, the committee behind Amendment 3, to join us in a live stream discussion. Now, rather than having a debate, we engaged in a discussion to help educate voters and ultimately allow you to decide. In this part of our discussion, we discussed that Amendment 3 is permanently part of our Constitution and what happens to residents if we're not happy with what Amendment 3 holds. Another question here. So, given that Amendment 3 will be part of Florida's Constitution, what are the risks if it becomes problematic? And I know we kind of touched on some of these. I just want to be able to give an opportunity to dive in there.
Problematic how, I guess, would be my question.
If people that voted yes are not happy with some of the outcomes after the fact.
Well, again, constitutional amendments, I would tell people to go back to where we were talking about this, like maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago, where I don't want to break it down again about how constitutional amendments work and how the legislature up in Tallahassee will mold this as they see fit. And so constitutional amendments are one thing, but I can assure you that they have been dealt with depending on the political will of what goes on up there. And so again, I'd refer people back to like 15 minutes ago and go back and listen to when I was talking about that.
Yeah. I just just going into how it's nearly impossible to unwind one of these, and the amount of the sheer volume of money spent on this amendment. I don't see a citizen initiative to be able to put this back on the amendment. Because here's the thing: like, as a company, it doesn't benefit them at all to have home grow or some of these other provisions in the bill. It just really doesn't benefit them. So why, and then on top of that, that could hurt their business, right? So if citizens did get organized and raised $110+ million or so to even get this back on the table, well, they're going to be fighting against a mega corporation or several mega corporations that are making tons of money on this.
And to your point, that's not going to happen, because that's not how constitutional amendments are. Let me say it this way. This thing, if it is put into a constitutional amendment, which I expect it again to pass, it's not going to be unwound by like a citizen-led constitutional amendment or something like that. Like the legislature has the power to implement a framework. They're going to implement a framework. And if they wanted to go back to the Constitution for some reason and change something, like they actually have something called a legislative constitutional amendment. So like they can do that. Every 10 years, we have a constitutional committee that comes on and puts constitutional amendments there. They're usually very controversial. They're not something that people do petitions for. There's a small committee of people who come and they do this constitutional committee where they put constitutional amendments on the ballot, just as like a group of like 10 people or whatever it is. So like, no, you're right. It would not be a citizen-led, like you come back and you adjust the Constitution thing. Like, again, the legislature, the governor, everybody up there in Tallahassee, and we have a Republican supermajority. And I want people to understand that. And again, as people don't know me that well, but like I'm the head of our Tampa Bay Young Republicans here. I'm our executive director. I'm with the Florida Young Republicans. I work with the international Young Republicans, the GOP, everything. I'm full on usually with the GOP, 90% of the time. This is not one of the 10, this is one of the 10% of the time. But we have a Republican supermajority up there. They are not going to just come. If this fails, you will not see a homegrown bill. You will not see a constitutional amendment that they advocate for to expand recreational. They're going to take this and they're going to say, we won, we did it. And if anything, they're going to put more regulations on you, and they're going to come after a lot of the hemp business like they did last time, last year in the last session, to try to regulate that business. So what you're going to see is a more aggressive Tallahassee, enabled Tallahassee of Republicans and conservatives that are going to come out, and they're going to put more regulation on you if this does not pass. If this passes, forces them to the desk, and then and this has been something that I've been advocating for decades. I've always been a libertarian Republican.
No, I appreciate that. Well, it's funny because you talk about the CBD bill, right? DeSantis vetoed that bill. So, I think he's got a sound mind when it comes to it. And
He's
he's
gonna go back. He's
definitely
gonna do it next year, and redo a few things, and we'll do it again. So
Yeah, and he's
we'll
definitely
see.
not for recreational. So I just can't see him or any of the legislators in the state of Florida, especially being predominantly Republican and who are typically not for recreational. They're just not going to be for this. I mean, there's a lot of people that just don't even believe this is really helping people, which I could
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot
a
of
lot of data about that.
yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of lawmakers that don't see the value in that.
And in the hemp regulation stuff, who backed that? That came to like it wasn't legislators that backed it. Who actually backed the hemp regulations that came to DeSantis' desk?
Well, you're going to start seeing what you see in California and stuff like that, where you have like there's just kind of this rampant like abuse basically in that industry, which is what Gavin Newsom just had to come down and crack down on it. They're doing what their constituents ask for when it comes to that kind of thing. Where like, look, I've had this argument with people at the county level here too, where they come in, they want to regulate the smoke shops for not being too close to like schools or colleges or whatever it is like that. They're listening to constituents saying, parents come in and they start complaining about like, oh, we went to this store and my kids bought this thing. Then they want to do something. Everyone wants to feel like they want to do something. I was really against there was a vaping bill too. I was like so against the vaping bill last year. I made a whole video about it. If people want on my Instagram and go look at it, it's still up. But they wanted to try to regulate the vaping industry here because of all of the different varieties of vapes and everything. And so like they want to feel like they're doing something for their constituents. And again, you have to like put yourself in the mind of a politician that doesn't have a lot of creative ideas or anything like that. And then they come in, they get complaints about something, and then they want to go back to their district and win an election like they're trying to do right now and say, well, I went and I protected kids and I saved this school and I saved this and I did that. And like, that's where all of that comes from. That a lot of politicians are only motivated by pressure. And this is one of the biggest pressure campaigns to actually do something about the recreational marijuana industry that I've seen in a long time. And if there's not pressure on politicians, they're going to continue to act in their own self-interest.
That is true. And just kind of going back to my question though, who pushed the CBD bill that was trying to take control of CBD? And it was actually SB 1698. It was actually three dispensaries came together and put together. So it wasn't legislators that put that
Well,
on.
let's vote it. Yeah, I mean, it was passed as a full majority. It was a unanimous vote in
Right.
the Senate and the House.
But they didn't.
So
They didn't. But they didn't.
unanimous.
They didn't bring it though. Who
They,
brought it to
they
legislators?
voted for it.
Three of the big dispensaries brought it to legislators, and they were trying, and essentially, and it makes sense. I mean, from a business standpoint, they were trying to control CBD, so everything hemp or cannabis related had to go through them. I get it, but again, it just kind of illustrates the spirit of this amendment, and the spirit of this amendment is not for the people; it's really for these mega corporations that are they're going to control cannabis for the duration in
I think
Florida.
everybody in this industry. I think everybody in this industry is fighting for their own self preservation, right? I mean, like, look, you see people who have companies. No offense, but like, if you're, the doctors have an angle on this. The dispensaries have an angle on this. If you're in a competing industry, you have an angle on this. If you're the tobacco industry or the alcohol industry, you've got an angle on this. Like, I mean, it's become such big business that people are, concerned for their business. They're concerned for their interest in this and everything. And then you do have people who are just like, I just want to grow it at my house and everything like that. But again, this, we talked about it already. Like it doesn't actually address that in the constitutional amendment, and it can be something that can be addressed. But almost everybody involved in this has some sort of interest in it.
Well, I got to tell you, I don't even like referring to what I do as an industry. I think I find it a kind of a dirty word. Here's the way I look at what we do. There's always going to be people suffering from conditions, right? People are going to always get sick forever. And this significantly helps thousands and thousands of people. And when you have something that's this effective, people are just going to continue coming back. So that fuels our business. Like, and I don't want sick people. In fact, if I would be happy to move on to another business if everyone was cured. That's just not the reality we live in. So
Sure.
I'm invested in positive outcomes for patients. And what hinders positive outcomes is access to quality products. That's what this amendment threatens, because if this passes and it's the dispensaries that can dispense and produce products are limited to a handful of bigger dispensaries, then the quality is not going to be there. It just isn't. Diversity is what drives great quality, and this amendment limits the diversity that's possible, and
The
that's the problem.
amendment doesn't limit diversity. The amendment doesn't limit diversity. The legislature limits diversity. The legislature controls licenses. They could walk out. Governor DeSantis can walk out tomorrow and say, "I have 1,000. I want to give out 1,000 licenses, and we're gonna totally alter everything that you're complaining about here." I don't mean to say complaining in a mean way. Like I mean like
No,
all the gripes that people in the industry have that want to see a bigger free market and everything. The governor can go do that. The legislature can go do that. The constitutional amendment has no say over how many licenses are given, how it's given, like what the definition of all of these things are. Like this is something that's totally controlled by Tallahassee. So one of the frustrations I have with campaigning for the amendment is that I'm like, the amendment doesn't change the process for everything like that. They have full control up there. They have full control up there to do all of the things that they want to do, whether it's good or bad. And again, I don't want to give them all the credit in the world, but like, because they mess things up a lot on implementation, but like it is entirely up to them.
well, you're absolutely right, and they do have full control. And the only thing, so something I just want to kind of pause on is, we learn a lot from history, right? Looking back definitely helps us pave a better way forward. And when we do look back, especially in the 8 years the medical programs have been around, new licenses haven't been released. Home grow hasn't been put on. And that's for patients that are suffering. There is nothing. So looking at history, right? Same legislators going forward, there is no way that they're going to now magically say, you know what? Let's do home grow. Let's remove vertical integration so smaller cultivators can get in, because that's reality. Vertical integration, there is not a single small cultivator that has $50 million to get into the game. It just doesn't happen. And you say it's in full control of the legislator, but it's not. The Constitution says
if this constitutional amendment does not pass, I promise you, you will see zero movement on all the things you're talking about for the next decade, because no one else is going to come in and try to fund a constitutional amendment again if this fails. It's not happening again. So if this fails this time, you're not going to see movement until, like, for all the reasons you just said, there's no political motivation by the conservatives that own the supermajority up there. And by the way, we're going to be a Republican supermajority for the next decade. I promise you, until they redistrict, you have another decade of Republican super control up there. So like, this is how the political reality is on the ground. If this does not pass, you will see no movement on anything else regarding homegrown, regarding recreational, anything like that. Because it's been tried and denied.
You got to forgive my skepticism. I've heard a lot of promises, but what's in black and white doesn't point to go in that way. Unfortunately,
that's not a promise. It's just that's just an extrapolation on what the last few decades have looked like under the rule we have in Tallahassee. Like, they're not for homegrown and they're not for recreational marijuana. They've denied bill after bill after bill after bill, and that's why this is constitutional amendment. If it were done the way that everybody's talking about, take it to Tallahassee, do it right, all that stuff, it could have been done at any point, at any legislative session. Why is it not happening? Because they don't actually want that.
Well, they don't want it, so it's not going to happen in the future either. And that's kind of the point. I guess we're going to have two different takes on the same thing.
This amendment forces it to happen.
It doesn't force them to put any of that on the table. It doesn't force them to release licenses.
It's actually in the amendment. You have a 6-month time frame to implement a framework. 6 months, right. So it has to be done next session.
But in that framework, that framework does not, and there's nothing in the amendment that forces them to open more licenses to increase the potential for supply chain. So that's a potential problem. And again, and when I say promises, these are things that could happen, but as of right this second, they're not. And as of the last 8 years, they haven't been. So it doesn't make sense to me. None of this stuff, it just, if it can't be done under medical with suffering people, I don't see anything happening with recreational or further. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you want to see the entire live stream discussion, unscripted and unedited, go to our YouTube channel, or you can go to our Facebook page for My Flow to Green, or you can get the audio versions on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Feel free to check us out. Get educated before you vote.